from my autumn wonderland in my backyard. I love this weather so much. I talk about it all the time. Today we had a really boring meeting at work. I shouldn't say that, but I don't think anybody in that room would disagree with me. Our MLS is doing just a bunch of changes to our documents, our forms, and we had to go through all of those. And it was 3 hours of tediousness, but somehow we got on the conversation during the break about weather, and my managing broker was telling one of the girls how much I love the snow and the storms and the wind and the rain and the whole thing, and I do. I love it. I just think this is the best time of the year. But look how beautiful it is. Let me see if I can show you some of that. This is just a little corner of the backyard. It's actually, I'm sitting in the area that will be my new herb garden because we've moved out into this little cottage, and that means my herbs have to come with me, or I have to abandon them and let the renter have them, the tenant, I should say. So a couple days ago, I did the first, actually, let me be honest about that. I did that part 1 series of the series of renewing your awe. I did that a year ago, sitting on my front porch of my house, and it just sat on my phone forever. I did nothing with it. So I was going through videos trying to delete them, because you know how it is when you store too many. And I thought, oh, I should probably upload that one first. So I do want to finish that series because I think it's just important for us to constantly take the pulse of our awe of God, if that makes sense. Come here, kitty. My cat's under the chair. Because without that awe of God, we can lose our reverence, we can lose our respect, we can lose our love. Definitely we lose any intimacy we feel with God if we don't have a sense of awe for Him. You know, He's not your homeboy. He's not your buddy. I mean, when I hear people say things like that, I just think, oh my word, if God were to appear before you right now, you would fall flat on your face, as I would. So we have to be careful that we keep a sense of reverence and awe for Him. Oh, my friend Lisa's calling. So I do want to continue on with a little series on renewing your awe. Yes, or not yesterday, but the first one that I posted was on getting alone and getting quiet with God. I think that we have to learn to drown out the noise, you know, that's all around us, because it's just a noisy existence. Do you agree? Can I get an amen to that? There's noise everywhere. It's right now, dogs are barking behind me. It's just impossible to have peace and quiet, it seems sometimes. But I'll never forget my friend Stephanie Tino when she was a young mom and her boys were just little toddlers. She worked, and I remember her telling me one time that when she would come home, she'd be so desperate to get alone with God for just 5 or 10 minutes that she would play hide and seek with the boys, and she would hide in the closet so she could pray. I thought that was beautiful because, you know, we do have to be purposeful about getting alone and getting with God. So for the second part, though, the next thing I would say is, if you feel that God is far from you, or if you have just lost that love that you had for God, or even if you're doubting that God is there, I would challenge you to pray and ask God to reveal Himself, because He wants that more than you do. And I have found so much strength and so much hope in that realization that my little puny request of something like that is, God just, I'm sure, shakes His head and says, if she only knew. Did that get recorded? Because my battery light came on. Anyway, I feel like God would say, if she only knew how much more I want that for her than she wants it for herself, she wouldn't ask with little trembling, you know, lifted hands. So I remember a time when Zach was about, I think he was about 12 or 13. And again, Dan and Lisa, our friends from Arizona, they were here, and their son Brock and Zach were hanging out a lot. Brock was, I think, 3 years old or maybe 4. But I remember that Zach was going through a little period of doubt. And he came to me one day and he said, Mom, how do you even know if God is real? And it was one of those moments as a parent where I just sort of internally gulped, you know, but outwardly, I don't know how I managed to be calm about it. But I just said, Zach, I have no doubts myself that God is real, because He's revealed Himself to me far too many times, and too specifically for me to ever have that doubt. I said, so if you're feeling like that, just go ahead and ask Him. Say, God, reveal Yourself to me. And so he said, okay, I'll do that. So it was the next day, Brock asked Zach if he wanted to go downtown with him. And I didn't know this because I would have put, the halts on this. But what they did was they were walking up and down State Street in our town, our main street. I just didn't at that time. He must have been about 12 because I was way protective at 12. I mean, I never really gave up on being overprotective, but at that time I wouldn't have wanted Zach walking around town for sure. But I didn't know this until later. And the reason I found out was because Zach came bursting through the door a couple hours after he'd gone. And he said, "Mom, he's real." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "God revealed himself to me." And he'd only prayed the day before. And I said, "Well, what happened?" And he said, "Brock and I were walking down the street, and I let it go because I wanted to hear the whole story in its entirety without interruption by an overprotective mother, which would be me. But I did ask him later, "What were you doing on State Street?" Anyway, he said they were walking on State Street, and he was on the outside, closer to the street. And he said that they were walking by the co-op. I do live in a town with, it's what do you call those? Outlet mall on one side of the freeway and a farmer's co-op on the other, and tractors on the four-way stops very often. So that's how I live. But he said they were in the co-op or walking by it, and someone was doing some work on a sign up above, one of those, what do you call them? Those neon signs. They're not neon, but you put the letters on them, that kind of sign. And the guy was welding or doing something like that. And Zach looked up to see what he was doing, and some sawdust, I hope it was sawdust, something from what the man was doing fell and got in his eye. And he said he blinked to get it out, and then he put his head down and kind of stumbled over, didn't realize he was doing so, but he wasn't looking. He stumbled right over to the street and heard a noise and felt a whoosh and put his head up just after a city bus, big long city bus, had gone right past him, and the mirror had just gone over his head. He said if he'd put his head up just a second sooner, he would have lost his head. And of course I was horrified by that, but it had done what God intended it to do. Zach realized that God had his hand on him, and it caused him again to know that God was real and he was there and he was involved in our lives, which you have to have if you're going to have awe. I just don't know how you can have awe of a God that you believe created the world and then, walked away and left us to our own devices and is off doing something else. It's the fact that you know that God knows you intimately and loves you and is near and watches. I mean, it's all those things combined help you to understand that God is seeking a relationship with you. And that in itself is awe-inspiring. So, in Matthew 7 and 8, Jesus said, ask, let me look it up. I got to get it right. I want to say it right because I can paraphrase this all day long, but I want to say it correctly. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be opened. So Jesus himself is inviting us to ask. And we have to ask with an attitude of expectancy and of belief. In James 1, I think it's 1, I don't think it's 2, I think it's 1, we read that James said, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. But when he asks, he must believe, for he who doubts is a double-minded man, unstable. For he who doubts is like a wave of the sea. Oh my word. 1 second. For he who asks, but when he asks, he must believe and not doubt. For he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, unstable in all his ways. Why don't you look that up? It's in James. But I'm pretty close on that last part. And I know I got the first part right. My sister and I memorized James 1 many years ago. And every time we saw each other, we would burst into, James, a servant of God, to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations. Greetings. That's for you, Meg. So I do know most of it, but that last part kind of threw me. Anyway, when you ask, you need to ask believing that God wants to give it to you, that he wants to reveal himself. So I would just challenge you to do that. Number 1, be purposeful about getting alone with God and having some time of reflection and just prayer. And prayer that is not an onslaught of words, but prayer that sits quietly and waits for an answer too, because that's important. You have to let God get in there a little bit. And then secondly, I would say just come right out and say, God, I want you to reveal yourself to me. You know, he has spoken to me in dreams and in visions and through things children have said and through just countless examples of situations where I needed something and he provided exactly what it was. He has many ways of revealing himself to me, to us, I should say. And the number one way that he reveals himself is through the word. So after you ask him to reveal yourself, commit that you're going to be in the word and you're going to be reading it with an eye for God's revelation of himself to you. I'm excited for that for you, and I'd love to hear how it goes if you do take that challenge and ask that of God. So God bless you, and we'll talk soon.